Good morning. Welcome to the Sunday morning message from Open Door Bible Church in West Ossipee, New Hampshire. Today we are in Proverbs chapter 24, but I've really got to take you back to Proverbs 22 to be able to finish this section. In verse 20 of Proverbs 22, we read these words: "Have I not written to you excellent things of counsel and knowledge?" Now that's the New King James. This is one of those places I got to get you into some different translations to find what I really want to drive home. So if I read it from the ESV, it says at the beginning of Proverbs 20:22 from the ESV, "Have I not written to you 30 sayings of counsel and knowledge?" And from the NIV it says, "Have I not written you 30 sayings of counsel and knowledge?" So this appears differently depending on where you look. From Proverbs 22:20 through much of today's chapter is the remainder of those 30 excellent things. I mentioned to you that at this point in Solomon's life, Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. Solomon studied everything. He was an artist, he was a poet, he was a scientist. But at this particular period in his life, he was reading Egyptian wisdom writing, written by a guy by the name of Amenhotep. He would write wisdom in groups of 30. So Solomon went through this period where he did things in a group of 30. So this is part of that list of 30 excellent things. All right, verses 1 and 2 deal with not envying the evil man. Verse 1, "Do not be envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them. For their heart devises violence, and their lips talk of troublemaking." Now, it is common and sometimes difficult for us not to do this. There are times when evil men seem to prosper, and we become envious of them and then desire to be with them. Sometimes we're just plain confused as to why are these people being blessed. God's got a plan, folks. I don't know all of it. You don't know all of it. The good news is I don't have to stand up here and explain God. God is God. He's big, I'm little. He's smart, I'm not. He's God, we're people. We're not going to understand everything. That's okay. We don't have to. Verse 2, "For their heart devises violence, and their lips talk of troublemaking." The kind of evil this proverb has in mind is the kind associated with violence and troublemaking. Now, this is often prompted by the desire to make quick and easy money, to gain status through violence and troublemaking. It is a temptation we need to resist, right? Anytime something in life sounds too good to be true, it's probably not. By the way, if somebody offers you an easy way, there isn't one. Don't listen. I know Michael's not like this, but my son always wanted to find an easier way. He spent years learning there wasn't an easier way, and he learned it the hard way. There's no easy way. We just got to tough it through. All right, wisdom for the home, verses 3 and 4. "Through wisdom, a house is built, and by understanding, it is established. By knowledge, the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." Now, it talks about through wisdom, a house is built. Now, we can think of the actual material building of the house and how wisdom, proper engineering, proper construction techniques are necessary. The same is true of moral and spiritual values of a home. These moral and spiritual values must be built through wisdom and established through understanding. How do I get that? I read a proverb every day, over and over, every month. I read through the Proverbs. Verse 4 says, "By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." The blessing of building a home with God's wisdom, God's understanding, and God's knowledge will bring precious and pleasant riches in the spiritual sense, for sure, and often in the material sense. God's blessing is on the home that seeks and honors his wisdom. I am not the head of the house. God is the head of the house. Anytime I try to take that place, I'm in trouble. All right, verses 5 and 6 talk about the strength of wisdom. A wise man is strong. Yes, a man of knowledge increases strength. For by wise counsel you will wage your own war. And in a multitude of counselors there is safety. Now Solomon understood the strength of wisdom and how a man of knowledge increases in strength. Folly, foolishness, not following God's instructions, makes a person weak and vulnerable. Verse 6, by wise counsel you will wage your own war. The strength of wisdom isn't solidarity. It understands and relies on the wisdom of others. It learns how to use the wise counsel of others and the safety of a multitude of counselors. What he's telling you is go and get godly advice before you make any big decisions. Now, I'll tell you to go and get godly advice before you make any big decisions. What people normally hear is go and get advice. They lose the word godly. And then what they do is they go and find somebody they know will agree with them and ask them for advice. That isn't what this is saying. You want to surround yourself with people who are smarter and more godly than you are. And you want to ask their advice and you want to take it. You don't want to ignore it. God put that there for our protection. I try not to make big decisions on my own. Any church decision I discuss with Pastor Terry before I do anything else. And we try to figure out together what God wants us to do. But you got to have input from other people. None of us know it all. All right, verses 7 and 8 and 9. Wisdom is too lofty for a fool. He does not open his mouth in the gate. He who plots to do evil will be called a schemer, and the devising of foolishness is sin, and the scoffer is an abomination to men. So it says wisdom is too lofty for a fool. Remember, a fool is somebody who's not following God's instructions, not following God's principles. The fool looks at wisdom and thinks it is above him or her in the sense of being too lofty. They think it's overly smart and superior, and they tend to glory in the lowliness of their folly. They think anybody who's got wisdom is foolish. The diligent prove that the treasure is really not out of reach, but it's too high for a fool to reach. Now it describes this fool, it says he does not open his mouth in the gate. Now we've talked about gate before in Proverbs. In Bible times, the business of the town was not done at the town hall. The business of the town was done at the town gate. Right inside the gate was a table. The elders, the rulers of the city would sit there. You would go there to get judgments. You would go there to argue your tax bill. You would go there to get justice. You would go there to get wisdom. So the fool doesn't open his mouth in the gate. He isn't looking for wisdom. He isn't looking for help. He's just standing there watching the process unfold, but he's not part of it. He's not interacting with it. Verse 8, he who plots to do evil will be called a schemer. Now, we hear that word every now and then in our language, but not very often. But a schemer was a really bad thing to call people in Bible times. It was a bad label to have. It meant you couldn't be trusted. It meant that you were conniving, that you were devious, that, your word couldn't be believed. Here the description of Schema portrays him as a cold, calculating, active person. Now get this. The person we talk about as a fool is capable of immense mental activity. But after that, they still don't know what to do. And what they do in the end is commit sin. So it's not that they can't make their brain function, they can't apply what their brain comes up with. It says in verse 9, he is an abomination. Anybody can be a fool. It takes a wise person to speak positive, uplifting things. By the way, that's what we're supposed to be doing all the time. We're supposed to be uplifting people. We're supposed to be encouraging people. People you come across each day ought to be better off that you came across them than if you hadn't. All right, a measure of your strength, verse 10. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. Now, it doesn't say if adversity happens. This verse is assuming adversity happens to everybody. We all have trouble. How come? Because we live in a fallen world. I'm glad this world is not my home. I'm glad I'm just passing through. This world, as we sit in it today, is broken. Stuff wears out. Stuff breaks down. Stuff bites us. Stuff stings us. Stuff causes us to break out in rashes. Our teeth go bad. We live in a world where everything is falling apart. It's going to happen to all of us. But when that happens, the Christian, the one with faith in God, shouldn't faint. If we have faith, we will be all right. We need to take every single thing and turn it over to God. There is nothing that we are going to experience in this life that God can't help us with. And don't give me the but, Pastor, you don't understand. You're right, I probably don't understand, but my favorite two Bible words are but God. But God covers everything. That's what we want to do. We want to be trusting on the Lord. All right, verse 11 and 12. Help those who are on their way to destruction. Deliver those who are drawn towards death. And hold back those stumbling to the slaughter. If you say, surely we did not know this, does not he who weighs the hearts consider it? And he who keeps your soul, does he not know it? And will he not render to each man according to his deeds? All right, verse 11. Deliver those who are drawn towards death. The idea is of those people who are on their way towards destruction. They are stumbling. They are headed towards the slaughter. We ought to be there to help them, to deliver them, to stop them before they go over the edge. Is that easy to do? No. Does it take time? Yes, it does. Is it costly? Most of the time. But it's still our job to do. Now, an example of this would be Esther. Esther was the queen. She had it made. Except her people were in trouble. Now, she could have kept quiet and looked the other way, but she didn't. She stuck her neck out, literally. King could have cut it off. But she stuck her neck out for her people, and she saved her people. So, we need to be doing. Now, we can't make excuses, this says. Verse 12. Surely we did not know this. We should not be indifferent towards those headed towards destruction. Often they reject God's wisdom and are hostile. They are hard to love. They are hard to help. They are hard to deal with. They're going to push you away. Help them anyhow. God weighs our hearts. God knows what we're doing. It says, will he not render to each man according to his deeds? God will make the fool to answer for his folly, but he will also cause the indifferent one to answer for their lack of care. God will render to each man according to his deeds. Sounds like my memory verse today, doesn't it? Galatians 6:7. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. That verse applies to every single area of our lives, and we need to let that sink in. All right, verses 13 and 14 talk about the sweetness. Like the sound of that? The sweetness of wisdom. My son, eat honey, because it is good, and the honeycomb, which is sweet to your taste. So shall the knowledge of wisdom be to your soul. If you have found it, there is a prospect, and your hope will not be cut off. So this is another one of those word pictures. Now, he starts with practical advice. My son, eat honey, because it is good. Now, that's the Old English. If I was to bring this into New English, it would be, my son, eat hot dogs. Red ones. Okay? Eat, have something good. No, yes. Now, the proverb draws on the image of honey. Honey is health-giving, it's good for you, but it's used as a word picture for wisdom. So verse 14, so shall the knowledge of wisdom be to your soul. It's going to be like honey. It's going to be sweet. It's going to be pleasant. It's going to be good for you. The gaining of wisdom rewards the life the same way that the sweetness of taste is the reward of honey. We should learn to discern and appreciate the sweetness of wisdom. Once we appreciate the reward of wisdom, our hope will not be cut off. It says, if you have found it. So he implies that there indeed is some difficulty and trouble in the pursuit of wisdom. But that is more than compensated for with the sweetness and the advantage of it when a person obtains it. We have to work to get wisdom. We have to study. We have to meditate. But it's good for us. All right, verses 15 and 16 talk about the resilience. There's a word I like. The resilience of the righteous. Verse 15. Do not lie in wait, O wicked man, against the dwelling of the righteous. Do not plunder his resting place. For a righteous man may fall 7 times and rise again, but the wicked shall fall by calamity. So this proverb presents its wisdom in the form of a command to the wicked man, telling him not to rob or plunder the home of a righteous man. Why not? Because it's not going to end well for him. It says, for a righteous man may fall 7 times and rise again. The reason why the wicked man should not rob the righteous man is that in the end, the righteous man will not be defeated. Even when he may fall, even 7 times, he shall rise again. Now, this ought to not only be a warning to the wicked, but it should give hope and assurance to the righteous. The righteous can be confident of this very thing. Philippians 1:6 tells us that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. We can use that confidence to strengthen our lives to the fact that we never give up. Even if we get knocked down 7 times, we keep getting back up with God's help. God will make it possible. Now, is that true for the wicked? No. It says, but the wicked shall fall by calamity. Wicked have a different destiny. They're headed to a different place. They're going to live forever, someplace different than where you and I are going to live forever. We ought to warn them. All right, 17 and 18. Don't rejoice in the tragic destiny of the wicked. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls. Do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and it displeases him, and he turn away his wrath from him. So knowing that we should not rejoice when one falls, it should not make our hearts glad. David's bitterest enemy in the world was Saul. David was distraught when Saul was killed. Through all the stuff Saul did, all the time Saul tried to kill him, God gave David opportunities to kill Saul, and he didn't use them. He said, I'll not put forth my hand to touch God's anointed. It would have been easier for David to just get rid of Saul, but he didn't. He left it to God. And when God finally took Saul out, David was sad. David mourned over the loss of Saul. Now, why do we want to be like this? Because the Lord's going to see it, and it will displease him. If God sees our rejoicing over the fall of the wicked, he may turn his wrath away from the wicked man just to rebuke our proud, unloving heart. Don't put yourself in that position. We don't want to rejoice in evil happening to anybody. We want to be praying for everybody, especially our enemies. It's, anybody can love somebody who loves them. Takes God's grace to love somebody who doesn't like you. That person at work you can't get along with, that neighbor who's just a pain in the butt. We got to love them because God said so. Takes God's help. All right, don't let the wicked make you worry. It sounds like good stuff. Verses 19 and 20. Do not fret because of evildoers, nor be envious of the wicked, for there will be no prospect for the evil man. The lamp of the wicked will be put out. That doesn't even sound good. I don't want that to happen to me. All right, so Proverbs 24:1 told us not to be envious of evil men. Here we are told also not to worry or fret because of them. Not to be envious of them. The translation, do not fret, is really probably too mild. A better translation would be, don't get yourself infuriated over evildoers. Don't get all hot under the collar. Don't get all bent out of shape. Keep your cool. We're supposed to love God. We're supposed to love our neighbors. We're supposed to love those who despitefully use us. It says, the lamp of the wicked will be put out. This speaks of death waiting for the evil man, both in this life and in the next. Any good or pleasure they experience in this life is the best they will ever have or experience. The wicked man has no prospect for the future. None. Nada. Zip. Going to a bad place. And he's going to be there forever. All right. Verses 21 and 22. Respect for God and civil authority. Whether you agree with it or not, whether you voted for it or not. My son, fear the Lord and the king. Do not associate with those given to change, for their calamity will rise suddenly. Who knows the ruin those two can bring? So, wisdom tells us to fear the Lord. But it is also wisdom. Now, it says here king. We don't have kings here. We have elected officials. So I'm going to insert here, fear the king and the elected officials. All right? Now, he puts serving and fearing God first. And that's where God belongs. Our obedience should be given to elected officials only in those areas which do not violate the clear teaching of Scripture. Now, I have a president at the moment who believes in abortion. Abortion's wrong. Abortion's murder. I can't support that. I can't condone it. I can't say it's okay. I got to speak out against it. Say, no, that's wrong. I don't care what the government says. It's wrong. By the way, because your government says something's okay, doesn't make it okay in God's book. Okay? If God says it's bad, it's still bad. God hasn't changed his mind. There is not God 2.0. We haven't changed God this year that he now likes stuff he used to hate. If God hated it in the Old Testament, if God said it was wrong in the Old Testament, it's still wrong today. Now, we try to make it right. We try to make it look good with rainbow-colored flags. It's still wrong. It's still sin. It's still an abomination to God. I don't care what laws we pass. It's still evil and wicked. How did you get me off on that? All right, it continues. Do not associate with those given to change. Those who want to overthrow or change the present system must take great care. The revolutionary often finds that their calamity will rise suddenly, and they can bring great ruin in their revolution. Now, that is the end of the 30 wise sayings that we started way back in Proverbs 22:20. So what's the rest of the chapter? Well, it's further sayings of the wise, but it isn't part of the 30 sayings. I'm just telling you how it's written. All right. The importance of true justice, verses 23 through 25. These things also belong to the wise. It is not good to show partiality in judgment. He who says to the wicked, you are righteous, him the people will curse. Nations will abhor him. But those who rebuke the wicked will have delight, and a good blessing will come upon them. All right, not good to show partiality. Whether it is in the formal court of law or in daily interactions, we should never make judgment simply on the basis of partiality, simply on the basis of who we like or who thinks the same way we do. Those who are just like us can be very wrong. Those who are different from us can be very right. Don't place your idea of right and wrong on whether somebody agrees with you. You could be all messed up. All right. He who says to the wicked, you are righteous. This is what should never be said. In a wise moral society, the people will curse someone with such confused moral judgment, and the nations will abhor him. It is a mark of the folly of our present age that many monstrous examples of evil or wickedness today are told, you're okay. This proverb describes the working of a culture much wiser, that wouldn't be hard, than our present culture. Those who rebuke the wicked will have delight. Evil should be addressed and rebuked. We should not romanticize it or excuse it. If we don't speak up against evil, we are condoning evil. It is never the place of the Christian to sit there quietly and say nothing. Be like my friend and stand up in the town meeting and say something. Make your voice heard. Don't sit there like a bump in the law. Stand up. It's okay to stand up and say, by the way, the Bible's against this. That's a perfectly good argument. Don't condone evil. Don't be quiet about it. All right, the beauty of a right response. He who gives a right answer kisses the lips. Folks, this is a word picture. The proper response to a question or a difficult problem is always welcome to the wise person. We think of the many occasions when Jesus Christ was presented with difficult questions. He always gave a true, correct answer. His audience didn't often like the answer, but it was the right answer. By the way, the test of whether you should say something is not whether or not the audience is going to like it. It's whether or not it's the truth. If it's the truth, open your mouth and spit it out and don't worry about the consequences. Truth always is going to be okay. All right. Verse 27. Order your work wisely. This is common wisdom, but common sense is not that common anymore. Listen, and I'll go back and explain it based on the culture it was spoken in. Prepare your outside work. Make it fit for yourself in the field. And afterward, build your house. All right. In Israel, there is a rainy season and there's a non-rainy season. So it tells you to prepare your work outside. Make it fit for yourself in the field. He's talking about get the plants planted when they're supposed to be planted. Build your house later. If you build your house first, it's too late to plant the crops, and you're going to starve to death in your nice new house. It's saying two things in order. Plant the food so you got something for the winter. Then build the house. Right. See, I think the Pilgrims got that,
Yeah.
All right. Now, this emphasizes the practical rule. I love this. This is one of those things you take to the bank. The practical rule of producing before consuming. Not many people follow that rule today. Do you know what made that rule obsolete in the minds of most people? Credit cards. I don't gotta have money. I got plastic. I have no idea how I'm going to pay for this, but I got plastic. If I show them the plastic, they'll give me the stuff. Instant gratification. It's ruined this country. It's ruined several generations. People will take those debts to the grave and their kids will pay them. Don't fall into the plastic trap. You got me off the subject again. Stop doing that. Verses 28 and 29. The importance of speaking the truth about others. Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause. Or would you deceive with your lips? Do not say, I will do to him just as he has done to me. I will render to the man according to his work. Jesus wouldn't have done that. We're not supposed to do that. All right, we should only speak against someone if there is a good and righteous cause to do so. We often speak ill of others to hurt them, and that is a sin. God doesn't like that. He tells you it's lying. Would you deceive with your lips? When we speak against others without cause, we usually exaggerate and color the truth, usually to our own good. Not supposed to be like that. You can never do verse 29. I will do to him just as he has done to me. Getting even is not my job. The Bible says God will repay. It is not my job to get even. It's not even my job to keep score. Some folks won't actually do the deed, but they'll keep score to justify the deed in case they do it. You don't even get to keep score. How many times do we forgive? 70 times 7. That's like forever. Let it go. Move on. Say, God, this is what happened. I forgive. Help me to move on. And just let God take care of it. It's not our job to do it. Okay? 1 Thessalonians 5:15 says, we should not return evil for evil. Don't get even. We're supposed to, according to Leviticus, commit justice to God and let him deal with it. Now, it is natural to revenge wrongs. The world approves of it when we do it. You can do it and get away with it. Still doesn't mean God's pleased with it. Remember, the world's usually wrong. Don't trust them. All right. Verses 30 through 34. The tragedy of a lazy man. Michael, are you paying attention? It's all right, Mike. He's used to me doing this to him. I just help him. I went by the field of the lazy man, and by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding. And there it was, all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles. Those little round things that stick to your pants cuff when you're walking through the field. Its surface was covered with nettles. Its stone wall was broken down. When I saw it, I considered it well. I looked on it and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. So shall your poverty come like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. All right, let's try to unpack this. So he went by the field of the lazy. He could tell it belonged to a lazy guy just by looking at it. Do you ever drive through one of those, down a back road, past one of those houses with junk everywhere, broken windows, bummed out cars? I mean, yeah, you just, looks like the town dump. You can tell somebody's not keeping it up. I mean, it was just obvious to look at it. It was all overgrown with thorns. This is what the wise man saw when he looked at the field and the vineyard of the lazy man. Now, the lazy man did not plant the thorns or the nettles. He did not deliberately break down the stone wall. But, you get that but? His laziness made these things happen just as much as if he had deliberately done them. They happened through lack of care, through lack of maintenance and upkeep, through lack of going to the dump. How'd I get on that?
All rabbits.
When I saw it, I considered it well. The wise man learned from the tragedy of the lazy man. He didn't have to suffer the same things the lazy man did to learn the lesson. By the way, that's one of the marks of wisdom. We can learn from somebody else's mistakes. Now, I can remember as a teenager, that was back when I knew everything. I don't anymore. But when I was a teenager, I knew everything. And I can remember my mom, and especially my dad, telling me stuff, and I would question it, and they would say to me, "We're trying to keep you from making mistakes." And I kept saying, "But I want to make my own mistakes. I have a right to do that. I'm a teenager." I wish I'd listened more. All right. So he saw it and he considered it well. He learned the lesson. Now, the story invites the reader to recall similar observations of homes you have seen in disrepair and to draw the same conclusions. Lazy. Lazy is bad. Now, the lazy guy this is his motto. A little sleep, a little slumber. This is how the lazy man rationalizes his neglect of duty. A little sleep will surely cause no harm. We all need to rest. The problem isn't the sleep of the lazy man, it is his neglect of duty. Now, I love this quote. This came out of my commentary. I love this. Rest assured of this, that the best will become the worst if we neglect it. Did you get that? I'm going to do that again. The best will become the worst if we neglect it. Neglect is all that is needed to produce evil. Verse 34 says, "So shall your poverty come like a prowler." This is the destiny of the lazy man or woman. Because of this sinful neglect, poverty will come upon them as suddenly, as strongly, and as unwelcome as an armed intruder. In this case, the lazy man truly thinks himself innocent because he didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do all those things, but he didn't do anything to prevent them. He neglected. He was lazy. Now, that's talking about material things. As we close, let's think about spiritual things. If we neglect the field, it's sad. It is much worse to neglect our soul. Such a soul, when left to its own lazy ways, instead of being sown with seeds of grace, will become overgrown with weeds. So here's your test for today. Are we putting good things into our lives every day? Do we read our Bible every day? Do we read a proverb every day? You ready for the next one? Are we putting our armor on every day? Now, I got to tell you, if you come to this church regularly, you are never going to be able to stand before God and say, nobody told me I needed to do those things. Pastor Terry and I tell you every Sunday. Why do we tell you every Sunday? Because you and I and Pastor Terry, we all need to be reminded. But you are reminded. You're supposed to be doing this stuff. All right. That concludes our message on Proverbs chapter 24. Thank you for listening, you out there on the internet. If you would like to help our church in its ministry of supporting missionaries, go to our website, TODBC. That's shortcut for The Open Door Bible Church.org, and click on the donate button. We'd love to have you help. God bless you and have a great day.